Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Executive Director Roger Durling.
Welcome, everybody! So exciting. This is the last tribute of the festival. Oh, I know, but we'll be back, gang. Don't despair. Don't despair. I would love to thank our incredible sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Nora Hurley, the Manitou Fund. We adore them. Thank you so much. The Hollywood Reporter, the board of directors of the film festival. I am a half full glass type of person. And I know that some of you were disappointed that we didn't have certain directors, but I'm super excited that we have both Todd Field and Martin McDonagh and here in the house. And what it means is that we get to listen to them more. And which is, to me, the film geek in me is super stoked, super excited about this. You guys are in wonderful hands with Scott Feinberg moderating. He is adorable, but besides being adorable, he's the executive editor of awards coverage for the Hollywood Reporter, and he's also the host of his own Awards Chatter podcast. Please welcome my very good friend, Scott Feinberg. Hug it out. Enjoy, everybody.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming out for the final tribute of the fest. Thank you to Roger for always making it such a fun week plus here, and to all the board and sponsors, and especially the volunteers. It's always terrific here. And one of the things that I feel lucky about is that every year the Hollywood Reporter sponsors this Director's Tribute Evening, and as a result, I get to pick the brains of some of the most amazing filmmakers in the world, including the two who are with us tonight and are just amazing. One American, the other British, both Oscar-nominated this year for producing, writing, and directing their massively acclaimed films. Our first guest, I want to say a few words about. In Major League Baseball, a batter who consistently gets a hit 1 out of every 3 times at the plate winds up in the Hall of Fame. In film, making 1 great film out of every 3 would be a pretty incredible batting average as well. But our first guest tonight is 3 for 3 with 2001's In the Bedroom, 2006's Little Children, and 2022's Tar. All 3, and yeah, go right ahead. That's certainly. All 3 have brought him a screenwriting nomination personally, and at least one of his actors an acting nomination. In the Bedroom and Tar were both nominated for Best Picture. Tar is nominated for Best Picture. And Tar has brought this gentleman the first directing nomination of his career. It is a film about a world-class orchestra conductor and the power dynamics of her interactions with her personal and professional associates. As many of you who were here a week ago tonight know, that amazing orchestra conductor was played by the great Cate Blanchett. And thanks to the close collaboration of her with our guest tonight, that film is now one of only 4 that have ever been named the Best Picture of the Year by all 4 of the preeminent critics groups in the world: the New York Film Critics Circle, the Los Angeles Film Critics Association, the London Film Critics Circle, and the National Society of Film Critics. The other 3 films that have done that: Schindler's List, LA Confidential, and The Social Network. So, pretty amazing company. Without further ado, let's take a look at the work of Todd Field. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Todd Field. All right, we're going to trade spots. This is good.
I've been here before. This is the good chair.
Yeah. Well, Todd, it's first of all, congratulations on everything this season. So exciting to have a new Todd Field film, to have it be this amazing, and to get to talk to you. I want to begin by asking if you can share your journey to filmmaking is unusual. I mean, you were at one point, I think, pursuing jazz, then you were an actor heading in that direction, and we can note you were in Woody Allen's Radio Days, the movie Twister, even Stanley Kubrick's last film, Eyes Wide Shut. And then at some point, there's a pivot to directing. What brought that about?
How far back do I go? I don't want to bore you guys.
No.
I mean, I started out, yes, I started out like a lot of people as a child, obsessed with close-up magic, and then I discovered girls, and and then I started, playing music, and that's really what I wanted to do. And I got a job in high school at a second-run movie house, and I ran 6 projectors every night, and I kind of fell in love with movies. But I would never have been so bold as to imagine that I would ever be able to be involved with the making of films. And I went to school on a music scholarship, and then I followed a girl into the theater, and then changed my major and started being in plays and et cetera, et cetera. And then I moved to New York, and pretty quickly I thought, I said there were a lot of young people my age who were making films at NYU and places like that, and I would volunteer on these projects just so that I could get close to the camera. And I remember the New York Film Festival was on when I first moved to the city, and somebody shoved me across the street and said, "Those are films," And I never heard anyone call movies films before, and I learned very quickly what they were talking about. That year, the first year, was the Coens' first movie, Blood Simple, Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Paradise. There was a Truffaut retrospective, and many, many others. And that was kind of mind-blowing because the vernacular for those films were so different than what I was sort of accustomed to experiencing. So yeah, I acted for about 5 years. I moved out, went up to Canada, played some hockey, wanted to open a Mexican restaurant, was going to import tequila for the first time into the province of Quebec. And then...
Can I just pause you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I don't know if this, sometimes there's BS on the internet. I don't know if this is true, but I was a big baseball card collector as a kid. I have heard, maybe this is absolutely, if it's not true, this is going to be insane. Are you the reason that there was gum in baseball card packs? Was there something about? No. That was reported to be.
No, that started before we were born.
No, but I mean, there was something was Big League Chew or something?
Yeah, well, that's different. It's in a pouch.
But it was something about, it was related to
but
anyway,
that's
all right, we won't go there, but
we
it's not, at least it's not totally.
We digress. I'm trying to get up to the pivot points.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go past the tequila. Anyway, so somebody said that I should come out here and test for a film, and I came out here, and I met this young woman that turned out to be my wife, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going back to open this Mexican restaurant, and I'm importing tequila." And she said, "You're not a serious person." And I said, "What do you mean?" I think I'm really serious about the tequila. And she said, "No, if you really want to be involved in film, you need to be here." And she was very convincing. And so I moved here, and I did work in film for maybe 4 years, 5 years. But the whole time I had this sort of secret dream that I would enroll at the American Film Institute and become a fellow there. And I'd made a couple of films with Carl Franklin, who you know, who did Devil in the Blue Dress and many other films. A fine filmmaker, good friend. And he was at the AFI, and he really pushed me in, because they didn't want to take me. It was really owing to Carl that I got into AFI. So I quit acting. Serena, my wife, was supporting our household to get us through school. We had a young child at home, and The last film that I made before I went into school was by this wonderful filmmaker, Victor Nunez, who actually had a film here last Saturday. That film, while I was in school, went to the Sundance Film Festival, along with a short that I had made, and it won the Grand Jury Prize. And so I had no acting agent, I had no plans on acting, but as I came out of film school, my phone kept ringing for these movies you're talking about, like Twister and Walking and Talking with Nicole Hollison, her first movie, and then ultimately with Stanley Kubrick. Now, some of those jobs I took because I had to contribute to my household and chip away at my student loans, and the job with Stanley, obviously, I would have taken out loans to go and done. So.
Well, it's an amazing story, and AFI is now very happy to claim you as one of theirs. They're rightly so, but they just had the AFI Awards luncheon, and you were the toast of the lunch to have an alumnus who's gone on to such great things. But one of the things I wonder is, does that background in acting have anything to do you think, with your effectiveness at working with actors? I want to just note that you have directed 6 actors to Oscar-nominated performances. We had Tom Wilkinson, Sissy Spacek, and Marissa Tomei for In the Bedroom, Kate Winslet and Jackie Earle Haley for Little Children, and now Kate for Tar. I guess, do you think that having some understanding of what they do helps you to work better with them?
I don't know. I don't know. I know there are certain, sometimes I think our jobs are subtractive. It's about what you don't do. I was very lucky to work with some incredible filmmakers and to pay attention to what they did that was effective and maybe not so effective, and why things worked. And then filmmakers where I see they had trouble, and I could see why they were having trouble. And that's a really sort of privileged position to be in as a student of film, to be able to see different people's processes. As for how I speak to my actors or they speak to me, I think it's important to a point, but every actor is different, and they may not care about what I care about. Generally, I try to create an environment where the actors are the main focus, and they should be the main focus. I think there's a lot of, but I've seen people experience trouble, which is where they get obsessed with the mechanics of filmmaking. They get obsessed with the mechanics of a schedule and a production, and they don't realize that at the end of the day, we're going to watch these people on screen, and that we should have an environment to where these people on screen can go about their business, and that they shouldn't be expected to be behaving like the key grip. That's not what they do. They have a different job, and you may not think that they're preparing, but they are preparing. A lot of times, I think in filmmaking, you say action and you say cut, and after cut, everybody gets really noisy on a set. But cut is where you make the film. After cut, that's when you figure out, okay, what just happened and how can we change it? And that conversation can be very quiet, it can be internal, or it can be in dialogue with your actors. And so that's the main thing. Between cut and action, I think, is the main thing.
Wow. Yeah. Given that, tonight's Directors' Night here at the festival, I imagine that we have, and I know for a fact, we have a number of filmmakers and aspiring filmmakers here in the audience. And I think that, on the one hand, they're seeing you and Martin tonight on one of the, at a exciting moment in both of your lives and careers. But I think that it's important to also acknowledge, this is a challenge, can be a challenging, frustrating business. And I mean, I wonder if you, just because I've heard you speak really powerfully about this before, the fact that we didn't get to see a Todd Field feature between 2006's Little Children and 2022's Tar wasn't because you were sleeping in. It was because it's hard to get movies made in the way that you want to get them made, right? Can you talk about some of what you were up against in those years?
I think that this is something that all filmmakers have to face. It's a challenge for all of us. I don't think that I'm a special case, you know. I think that my circumstances were sort of informed by the fact that after making Little Children, I had this sort of epiphany that I had just been on the floor crawling around with these 2 3.5-year-olds, Sadie and Ty, for months. And I called Serena and I said, you know, wouldn't it be great if we could just do it one more time? Because we had 3 older children, one of them was going off to school overseas, et cetera, you know. And so when I went out onto the road, you know, I was out selling the film in Japan with my older son. She called me up and she said, you got your wish. So I think I set my sights pretty high and set the circumstances, you know, around the height of those sights, because I understand production and I understand what's a reasonable amount of support that you need to be able to execute. And so it was easy to say no to a lot of stuff. It wasn't even so much that I said, that others said no. Sometimes that did happen, but sometimes I said no just because the cards weren't right and I wasn't going to play them. You know, I'd rather stay home and, you know, and be the Little League coach of my son. You know, I mean, we won the championship and there was no 12-year-olds on our team and no one had ever done that in a 5-town Little League before.
Well, it's great that when your return to feature filmmaking was a project that I know it seems like from everything I could gather, you are as passionate about as anything you've done here with TAR. So I've got to ask you, when did the idea first occur to you? And before you even put it into script form, I know a lot of work went on even before that. Just, I mean, we said you have some background in music, but this is upper echelons of symphony orchestras. You know, I don't know. I'm curious how much that world you even knew about yourself before you dove into this.
Not much. Yeah. Not much. I mean, I was just asked by some student journalists on the way in here about that, the same thing. And they were saying, you know, who do you think, is there a person that was your guiding light in doing this? And it's funny. Student journalist is the first person to ask me that question. It's a very good question. And I think that would be Leonard Bernstein, you know. And I think that that had been, like many people, I think I had been really seduced by him because he was such an incredible advocate for concert music. But that was a very long time ago. And when I started this in March 2020, I had this character sort of built in a notebook, but she wasn't, I didn't know where to put her. And Peter Kujawski and Kiska Higgs and Scott Lambert had come to me and said, we're thinking about, we want to make a film about a conductor. Would you be interested in doing that? I thought, okay, sure, yeah, of course. And I didn't pitch the story to them. I didn't say, I just said, I'll do it, but you just have to trust me. And they said, okay, which is remarkable.
I was going to say,
you know?
say that doesn't happen, right?
It never happens. And so I knew at the beginning that she was the kind of character that I wanted to meet and understand that she really, really knew her stuff. And I think that was important in terms of catching that character at the beginning and sort of going with her, you know. It's not like there's going to be a test at the end of the movie. We don't need to know this stuff, but we need to know that she does. So it was the beginning of the lockdown, and I called up Mike Knobloch and Natalie Hayden at Universal Music, and I said, do you know anyone that I could talk to, a conductor? You know, because they were siloed like the rest of us. They couldn't go to work. And they said, well, there's this guy, John Mauceri. And I said, I just read one of his books. And I said, do you think he'd talk to me? And they said, yeah. Well, it turned out John Mauceri was Leonard Bernstein's assistant for 19 years. So John, you know, John's a great conductor. He taught at Yale. He's written several books, which if you have any interest, I would highly recommend that you read. But he also had conducted movie nights for the LA Phil at the Hollywood Bowl for many, many years. And so he'd been around films, and he wasn't, you know, as I would learn later, that when you talk to people, because it, you know, classical music is a little bit like academia, like it informs life, but it's really outside of life. And there are very particular kind of rules, you know, like, you know, secret signs and handshakes and things. And they get very nervous if you ask them certain questions often, you know. And movie people we're weird. We're like, you know, we're like the clowns that come in and the termites, you know. They're right to be dubious of us, you know. So, but John had been around it, and he understood film, so I could ask him questions. I didn't tell him what the film was about. I didn't say that it was, I just said, there's this conductor, you know, and I want to do this little move with the cellist. Would that ever happen? And he might say, well, no, not exactly, but maybe this, or maybe that, or maybe the other thing. So I had about, you know, I had several weeks with John on the telephone, and they were very, very fruitful. So I came out of that sort of master class with him. And once I started writing, it came, you know, 12 weeks later, I had the script. It was done.
I think one of the things you talked about with him was Mahler's Fifth, right?
Yeah.
Because this is obviously, if you've seen the movie, central to the movie, but you were, I guess when you discussed it with him, it sounds like it was almost, you were ashamed to say that was a piece of music?
Yeah, well, I mean, I told him, I said, look, she's completing, or I didn't say she, I never said it was a woman, I just said, there's this conductor. I hadn't told anyone except for my wife. So I said, this conductor has got this thing that they're completing, this sort of, you know, essentially a cycle of an arc of one particular composer. What should it be? And he said, well, what's your favorite piece of classical music? And I said, well, you're going to laugh, you know. And he said, no, what is it? Why are you being so sheepish? I said, it's Mahler's Fifth Symphony. He said, no one who is serious about concert music would ever be cynical about Mahler's Fifth Symphony, and let me tell you why. And then he started to unpack it. And he had just conducted it recently, and it was incredible. I mean, he's an incredible student of that piece. And he's like, well, it starts out with a funeral march, right? Then there's a storm, you know. Then there's a sort of love song, and it was perfect. I mean, it was absolutely meant for this film. Like it was like just sitting there, you know. So yeah. I mean, I owe that to John too.
The other thing that's, I mean, pretty striking, you've said you would not have made this movie without Cate Blanchett signing on to play Lydia Tarr once you decided you wanted it to be a female conductor. What was did you know Cate Blanchett? Was that like...
I knew, yeah, Cate and I met, I guess about roughly 10 years before I started the script. We'd met in New York City. Joan Didion and I had written a script together, and we very much wanted Cate to play the role, and she agreed to play the role. We had a very long meeting with her. And then sadly, and this is often the case, if you want to ask like certain projects that didn't happen, we just couldn't get the money because they said, oh, well, if you had an actor in this role, you know, we would give you X. But with, you know, if it's an actress, even Cate Blanchett, we would only give you Y. Well, none of us wanted to make that version of the film, so it never happened. But I finished, you know, that experience. The takeaway was I had just sat with really one of the great minds I had ever come in contact with, you know, and somebody that really was so exciting to talk about story with, because when she looks at a piece of material, you know, perhaps because of her theatrical background, she looks at the whole thing, you know, how all of it works. She's not just focused on Lydia Tarr, or she's not focused on this other project that Joan and I were talking about. She wants to understand all of it. So that was tremendous. I mean, Cate literally showed up, you know, on the first day of rehearsal, and she had memorized the entire script as if it was Hamlet. And I'm not talking about just the dialogue of everyone. She knew all the stage directions. I've never seen anything like that.
And learned German, conducting.
And learned German, and learned how to play Bach on the piano, and learned to conduct, and learned how to stunt drive, and had an American dialect, and on and on.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, amazing things. Yeah.
Well, that kind of begs the question, which I saw somebody else ask you recently, so and I thought it was a good one. How much of your job with Cate Blanchett is guiding her performance versus just letting her loose?
How much credit should I take for Cate Blanchett? Are you taping this? Because she's very active on the internet. Again, the student journalists asked me this on the inside, like, what is directing? And I think it's a really funny thing. I think, Martin, it'd be interesting to say, you should ask Martin that question too. I don't really, the division of labor is a kind of a dodgy proposition. There's certain things we all have to do, but at the end of the day, a director and an actor are people, and they're talking, and they're trying to be prepared enough, but nimble enough to be at the pitch of perception to make very, very tiny adjustments with each other. And that's ongoing, and that starts early on. In this case, it started 9 months before we were even on the ground together in Berlin. We'd talk every night when she got home from work. And it continued all the way through post, and that's a dialogue. It's no different than if you were sitting down and writing something together. And she's formidable, and she's a very, very exciting dance partner. Let me just put it that way.
Totally. One of the things that we spoke about when she was here a week ago, and you were here as well for that evening, the reality of the world of symphony orchestras at that top echelon is that there are not women in that role, right? There has never been. And so I wonder, the fact that you chose to have that protagonist in that position be a woman essentially in a man's world, not saying that's the way it should be or whatever, but that's the reality, and then she gets into things that we've predominantly seen men get caught up in recent years, some of the behavior. Was any of that so that the audience maybe looks at that kind of a situation, which again we've all seen for the last few years, in a different way? Does it having a female protagonist in that in that kind of well, you get where I'm going.
Yeah. So, in short, yes. But let's start with the men getting into trouble in the last few years. Men have been into trouble for the last few thousand years.
Yep.
We're just hearing about it
right.
in the last few years.
Right.
So, why have men been getting into trouble? Well, men have held power, simple as that. So, this thing that Cate and I wanted to build is really about power, and we wanted to examine power, and we wanted to understand the complicity of power and how that works. Nobody's up there alone. They're there by the grace of others, and they're there because there are winks and nods, and there's complicity, and there's payola, and there's all kinds of favors and things like that go on. And so how do you look at that thing? How do you look at the ugly stick of power? And whoever holds it, it's going to corrupt them. Well, if it was a man, as you say, I know how I'm supposed to feel about that. I would turn off. I wouldn't be looking at power. I'd just be looking at the man and saying, that's how we all are conditioned to feel, because unfortunately that's what's been going on for most of human history. So how do you get past that? Well, it's not a man, There was something else that was really important, which was, there's this, I think the problem with when you're looking at something that you're trying to accomplish, and you're saying, okay, at the end of the day, God likes a masquerade. We're in the pretend business. is not a documentary. And as you say, insofar as there has never been a chief female conductor of any of the so-called Big Five American orchestras ever, there has never been a female conductor as a chief conductor, a guest conductor, yes, but never as a chief conductor of any major German orchestra ever. This is a fairy tale, you know, and as a fairy tale, it's meant to do this one particular thing, which is to look at power.
It leaves, yeah. So much more we could get into. It really is as thought-provoking as any movie I can think of, and we will talk more about it in a little bit when we have Todd rejoin us. But first, I'm going to introduce a clip of our next guest, and then we'll do the shuffle. But hang tight for one sec. And our next guest is one of a small handful of people who have ever operated at the very top of both the theater world and the film world. For the extraordinary plays that he has written over the last 27 years, since he was in his mid-20s, he has won 3 Olivier Awards and been nominated for 5 Tony Awards. For his films, he has won 4 Golden Globe Awards, 4 BAFTA Awards, and 1 Academy Award, which came for his directorial debut, the 2004 short film Six Shooter, and he has been nominated for 6 other Oscars. He received Best Original Screenplay Oscar nominations for 2008's In Bruges, 2017's 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and 2022's The Banshees of Inisherin, the last 2 of which were also nominated for Best Picture, while Banshees, the story of 2 men on an island off the coast of Ireland whose close friendship is suddenly ended by one of them, has brought him as well the first directing nomination of his career. Let's take a look at the screen work of Martin McDonagh. Please welcome Martin McDonagh.
That was good.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Oh, you get the fancy couch. I see. I saw all this backstage.
Well, I want to begin by talking about Ireland because I think that it's a common misconception that you are Irish, when in fact...
Well,
Yeah.
it's complicated.
Okay, please.
Well, I was born in London, but my mum and dad came over from Ireland in the 60s and had me and my brother there. And so we were always going back and forth to the west coast of Ireland as kids. Our grandparents on my mum's side were still alive then. So I've always been sort of in between both places. I'd say I'm London Irish more than anything else, but I've only got an Irish passport.
Well,
Very handy these days after Brexit.
what is it? Is there something that has made you so often in your work on stage and screen come back to not only even just Ireland as a setting for your productions, but also particularly a series of islands off the coast? Let me just mention a few of these names. We have Inishmaan, which we have Inishmore, and now we have Inisherin, which was originally going to be, or there was a third. Was it Inisheer?
Inisheer, yep.
Okay.
Very good.
Tell me where that particular. The focus on that particular part of Ireland comes from.
When I was 6 or 7 years old, we visited Inishmore, the largest of the Aran Islands, as kids, because that's just across the bay from Galway, very beautiful county and city. My dad's from there, from the Gaelic-speaking area there. So that was his first language, weirdly. And I think it's the most beautiful part of Ireland, the whole west coast. My mum's from further up the west in Sligo, and that's where we used to go as kids much more often. But there was something, even as a youngster, it just felt, especially coming from London, where I grew up, just so you're in the middle of a city, concrete and steel and all that kind of stuff, and then going to this serene, beautiful, maybe serene might be the wrong word, but beautiful, cinematic, wild place, I guess must have had some kind of impact, definitely visually, and I think I've retained that, and I always kind of wanted to go back to that in a film at some point. But in terms of storytelling, the first plays I wrote were, the first plays where I felt free as a writer were all Irish. I'd been trying stuff that was sort of American set or British London set, and was sort of hemmed in by my heroes in those fields, like Pinter or Mamet at the time. But when I was writing plays, I think I combined those guys a little bit with some kind of wild Irish fucked up shit. And it all paid off.
Yeah, exactly.
I recommend.
And fun fact, correct me if I'm wrong, of all those Inish ... Inisherin is the only one that doesn't actually exist?
That's true. I had the title Banshees of Inisheer for maybe 20 years. I kind of wanted to round off this trilogy of stories set on each of the Aran Islands, and I had one set on Inishmore, one set on Inishmaan, as you know. The play that I wrote with that title didn't work, and then 8 years ago I tried something again which was a little closer to this. That also didn't work. And then I think even when I rewrote it 3 years ago, which is this version, it was still called Inisheer, I think. But I went just on my own after the script had finished and looked around Inisheer, and it's a beautiful place, but it was a little too small. There wasn't enough cinematically, I think, you could do there. So I kind of then, 3 years ago, got the idea that it had to be sort of a slightly more made-up place, using a couple of different, whichever locations we found, they had to be different ones. And then we found that most of the good places were on Inishmore, the biggest of the Aran Islands. And I hadn't really discovered Achill Island, which is up the coast, closer to where my mum's from. And that was the place with Brendan's house. I don't know if most of you seen the film? Or? Yeah. So the house where Brendan Gleeson lives on that kind of horseshoe bay is Achill Island. And the lake is Achill, and the pub road is Achill too. Everything else pretty much is Inishmore.
One thing I was interested to learn prepping for, you were nice enough to come to our writer roundtable for the Hollywood Reporter, and it was you and Tony Kushner, who both, two of our great playwrights, two of our great screenwriters, but very different paths. And in fact, while you became known first, I think, for your work in the theater, apparently would have chosen to be a film writer before a playwright. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, God, yeah. Even as like a 12, 13-year-old, I think that's when we got our first video recorder. And I kind of just watched thousands and thousands of films and fell in love with movies then. But the only plays I'd ever go to were when movie stars were in them. So I saw like Al Pacino in American Buffalo as a 14-year-old, and Martin Sheen when he used to come to London. So I never really had a fondness for theatre. Partly because apart from those plays, which are pretty kind of exciting and cool, a lot of the plays I started seeing in my late teens and 20s were kind of dull. You got to remember it's England. There's no one from England here, is there? Yeah, so I was kind of, but I was right. I had been writing for like 10 years, and the films I was writing were terrible, and blah blah blah. Radio plays were getting a little bit better, but when I kind of turned the page on like how to be a writer, plays were the next thing up. And I think I'd learned enough in those 10 years to have some kind of founding in dialogue and character and story, and then to transpose those tools to an art form which I didn't like, which was theatre. Something kind of clicked. And I think I tried to make plays as cinematic as possible and almost the opposite of the things I was seeing. And somehow I was sort of 24, 25 when this happened. And everything kind of fell into place at that time.
And then when you wanted to come, having established yourself as a man of the theater, to come back to film, was that, quote of yours. One of the fears I had being a playwright was to make a playwright's film, close quote. Does that describe what you mean by that?
I guess the fear was to make something that was just wordy and, set inside in a couple of rooms and wasn't cinematic, just talking heads. I'm trying to think of the worst examples of playwrights making films now, and I choose not to be bitchy. But I definitely didn't want to. I wanted my first thing, be it short or be it a feature, to be as cinematic as possible, which is probably why I chucked so much stuff into the short. Like
This is Six Shooter that you won the Oscar for, yeah.
Yeah, so it's 27 minutes, and I think probably 5 people die. There's a shootout. There's a rabbit that doesn't really make it at the end. There's a lot of crazy shit, and it's all on a train too.
Yeah.
Which I don't recommend as a first-time filmmaker.
With Brendan Gleeson.
With Brendan Gleeson, yeah.
How did you guys, because I'll obviously ask you this about Colin too, but how do you connect with Brendan for the first time?
I think well, I know, weirdly, his brother is a carpenter, and he works on theatre sets. So I met his brother through building the sets in Galway for my first plays. I don't know if it was through that or not, but Brendan came to see a trilogy of plays in Galway when I was around like 24, 25. So I'd met him there, and I don't even know if we stayed in touch, but I was a big fan. Like, he was like already 25, 30 years ago, the best in Ireland, as he still is. And so he was kind of godlike in a way. So I think I was speaking to the producer of who was going to do the short with me, and he said, who's your dream person to send it to? I said, well, Brendan Gleeson. And it's funny, you wouldn't usually think of sending a short to someone of that stature, but you hope. I guess the connection, him having seen the plays, I thought, okay, we'll give it a go. And he said yes sort of straight away, so it kind of worked out perfectly.
Well, and that was the beginning of working on film with great actors like Todd, who we just spoke with. You have listed how many? 7 actors for work in your films have received Oscar nominations. Frances McDormand, Woody Harrelson, and Sam Rockwell for 3 Billboards, and Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, Barry Keoghan, and Kerry Condon for Banshees.
Cool.
So that is quite a stat. And
how many did Todd get?
Pardon?
How many did Todd get?
Todd had. I'll let you guys.
I think I'm beating Todd by 1 there. But hey, who's counting?
Yeah. But tell me, like in your.
Oh, no, he's going to come out later. We got to do this.
Fight it.
Shit. Let's call it a draw.
Yeah. So, I imagine that a big part of that, it certainly helps to have great writing if you're an actor, but to be working from that. But can you pinpoint maybe from the theater or anywhere else where you've figured out how to kind of work so effectively with actors? I think one of the things you always fight for is rehearsal, right? Even on films, which doesn't happen often.
Yeah, very much so. I wonder. I listened to Todd's answer about that, and I guess for me it was I'd never directed any of my plays before, but I was always in the rehearsal room from day one with all of them, and would always be talking to the actors because I worked with a lot of good directors for stage, and the good ones aren't worried about that connection. I think the bad ones can be insecure about it, but the good ones will let you chat to the actors as much as you want. And through that process of 10 years of talking to actors, I think I had learned a lot that I didn't even know I'd learned when it came to the first day of shooting these films. Because I realized I know about character, but I love actors, and trying to solve issues between us is sort of, in answer to the question you had for Todd, is what is a director? I think that's it, is the friendship or the connection between a director and an actor, and trying to solve everything together, I think is the most important thing in a movie. But it was a tool I didn't know I really had. It didn't really come. I was too nervous, I think, on the short, but on Bruges, when we had the 3 weeks of rehearsal, it was the first time I kind of realized I did have more information than I knew I had. I did like actors, and I could explain why every line was there, or what I thought their reasonings behind each impulse that they had was. So that was a good thing to learn. I think I've carried that through all the films more than anything else.
And we'll note, so Brennan was with you on the short six-shooter. Then both Brennan and Colin were with you on your first feature in Bruges, 2008. Great film. Colin was with you on your 2012 feature, Seven Psychopaths. And then, of course, you've reunited the two of them for Banshees. And I guess I just wonder, we've talked a little bit about Brendan, but I guess part A, how did Colin enter the picture? And then part B, can you pinpoint what makes them so good, not just separately, because they obviously are, but especially when you've put them together?
Well, I think, I guess I'd sent Bruges, obviously, to Brendan, and that was like, I think that happened really quickly because we'd made the short and that had all gone well. But I think Colin, I think I met one or two actors for that. Because originally it was sort of written for two English guys, two London guys, strangely. But so I was meeting some English actors and some Irish ones, but I just sort of fell in love with Colin as soon as I met him. I was a fan of what he'd done, but I also kind of thought there was something untapped maybe about him in terms of, he'd gone through a lot of kind of the leading roles. And he was great at that, but I kind of wondered about, the more secondary characters, the more sensitive, the more broken type of characters. I kind of felt like it was something that was unexplored, maybe. So yeah, we talked, and I loved them as soon as I met him, and then I kind of knew that Brendan loved Colin, and Colin loved Brendan anyway. So it was almost a no-brainer to get them together. And then we had like 3 weeks of rehearsals, and it was just like literally the three of us like on couches like this, and just having cups of tea and just talking through the script. And I was kind of terrified, because I hadn't worked with two actors of that kind of magnitude before. But I think everyone was, I think Colin hadn't been in a rehearsal process before like that necessarily.
And as he has acknowledged, he was coming out of a pretty bleak period, personally, professionally. This was a new lease on life, potentially.
Yeah, I think it was his sort of first or second one, after all of that stuff. So that's probably another, for him, scary part of the process. But it was probably the perfect way to change things up, having someone as brilliant and supportive as Brendan, and someone who was trying to discover things on his own like me. So we rehearsed in Bruges itself, and I remember like at the end of some days we'd get bored and walk outside. And Bruges is so small, you would literally walk to the places where you were going to be filming in 2 weeks' time. And at one point we sat on a bench where I'd set the scene, and they just quietly started reciting the lines. And I was like, ooh, this is kind of good. This is, we should have a camera here. And literally from day one, that part of it was seamless and easy and a joy. There wasn't even too much. I'm not the kind of director who, has to come up with a bunch of motivations, or I couldn't really coax a performance that isn't there. For me, it's sort of getting out of the way of the actors and the script and sort of allowing that truth to unfold.
And so 14 years later, you get them back together for Banshees, although you had shown them each, I guess, a version of the script that you referred to a little bit a few years earlier. And I wonder, I guess, obviously these are very different characters, and they played in Bruges, in Bruges, I should say. But do you one thing that occurred to me watching, everybody's saying, please don't wait 14 years before you put them together again, but I wonder, have you ever discussed potentially a theatrical collaboration with them?
I've sort of tried in the past to sort of put it out there. They've sort of refused point blank. So that's that.
That's that, yeah.
No, I think they would be great together on stage. But I know it's kind of hard these days to get film actors to do theater.
Beyond the limited engagements, yeah.
Yeah. It's tricky, and no, I think we'll do another film together. I think that's the best way to.
Great. Carrie Condon, who plays Colin's character sister in Banshees, is somebody I think you might go back further than any of them with, right?
Yeah, even further. I first worked with Kerry when she was like 18, in like 21 years ago. She did the original Lieutenant of Inishmore in the RSC and in London. And she came to Off-Broadway as well. And she was like just dynamite in that. She had long hair to begin with, and we cut all that off. Well, the character had, very short hair, so you have to do that kind of thing. So she is this kind of punky, kind of raging young woman with a air rifle, and just blew everyone away. And we remained friends ever since then. She did 2 other plays of mine in the intervening years. But I always kind of wanted to write something for her.
And she pops up in 3 billboards.
She's the girl in the office who gets sort of punched a bit. But yeah, she was brilliant in that too. She's got a great scene with Caleb Landry-Jones and that. And but yeah, I really wanted to create something for her that allowed her to show, exactly what a master she is. And it's great when you do that and they just take it to a whole nother place.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
It's awesome. Banshees is, among a lot of things, I think it's fair to say, partly about the things that one feels one should or needs to give up in order to create lasting art, right? And the price one pays for doing so. Talk about the degree to which those are things that you have thought about in your own life. I think last night when you were introducing or presenting to Colin and Brendan, you made a little reference to the state of mind you were in when you picked up Banshees again to turn it into the version that we've seen, but just the price one pays to focus on art, the balancing act.
Well, I don't think I've had a terrible time of it, really, but I guess the years before the first play was on, you really had to sort of knuckle down, and there was an awful lot of rejection at that stage, which I guess you have to have some kind of an arrogance to get through it, or force of will, or whatever it is, determination. But I think that's probably a different thing to the themes in the movie. I don't really think that a writer or a musician even has to, even if they're creating darker things, I don't think they have to dwell in that. I don't think art has to come from pain. I think a lot of the artists I like have come from those places, but personally, it's I prefer an easy life. Yeah, right. I think we've all been through painful things and tragic things and despairing moments, and to be able to tap into that is really, really important, and to tap into that truthfully. But I don't think you have to stay in that place. Hopefully, you can, not be shy of it and be truthful about it, but not have to dwell there. So the whole debate in the film about Brendan's character, needing space and all that. You do need space, of course, but you don't have to go about it in that way. I'm on team Colin Farrell for this.
Yeah. The fact that you chose...
But then,
so.
He's a little bit boring. And what are you going to do?
Yeah. The fact that you chose to set Banshees in 1923...
Not Colin Farrell, by the way, the character.
Not a boring guy. Fact that you chose to set the film in 1923 certainly didn't make your life any easier in terms of finding locations and sets and period clothing and all that. So I assume it was pretty important to you the fact that you went forward doing that. Can you give us any insight into why? I mean, we do know that at that time the Irish Civil War is raging on the mainland. Is that something that was important for you that we be thinking about when they're having their own civil war on that island?
Yeah, very much. That's exactly it. Yeah,
Okay.
you answered that one for me, Scott.
Sorry.
It's to put up, it's one civil war with the backdrop of another civil war in its simplest terms. But weirdly, like setting something in a definite period like that was part of it, and finding locations that hadn't changed for 100 years was part of it too. I'd never made a period picture before, and it seemed like it's more trouble than it's worth, but it actually wasn't. Like seeing the actors come on, you literally see the characters appear off stage, and because of the costumes for some reason, and I was very fond of that, but no, it's all about war, I guess, the whole story and stupidity of that.
Yeah. One last question before we go on to the next chapter of all this. Take me into nomination morning of this year. A lot of people, I guess it's fashionable to kind of poo-poo it, but I think it's got to be pretty exciting that not only
I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
first directing nomination.
Yeah, thanks.
All four of your principal actors nominated. With the help of Paul Mescal, that makes it a full 1/4 of all 20 acting nominees are Irish.
Yep.
And Best Picture. I mean, just it's a cool moment, right?
It's amazing. And I know Paul from before. He was in one of my plays a few years ago.
Really?
So I love Paul. So it's great, to have your mates. That's the best thing about this whole experience this year is you're going to all these events like last night and all of the governors and the Oscar luncheon and all that kind of stuff. And you're just there with your mates. It's just so sweet. And they're all nice, they're all fun. And I'm friends with the editor and the composer, Carter Burwell and Mikkel Nielsen. And they're there too. It's just crazy, but fun.
Nice. Well, speaking of mates, I know this is a relatively new mate of yours. Let's bring back Todd Field to join Martin McDonagh.
Woohoo!
Welcome back.
I just want to say that I'm part Irish.
Are you still open for acting roles?
Margaret O'Halloran from Galway, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, maybe there's a collaboration here. Let me ask, I guess, just first of all, if you can share, you guys have met before, but not extensively?
We were just talking about that earlier. We met in Venice for the first time. What was it? An opening? Because it wasn't.
No, we met at Venice. You were getting a prize. Kate was.
Oh, yes, yeah. So it was a week after we.
It was a week after, yeah.
Yeah, and we've kind of been on the road selling this stuff for was it 6 months, a year? How long have we been doing this?
I don't know, Martin.
That was September with Venice.
So we bumped into each other at other events and round tables and all that stuff. And this is kind of the part of it that I kind of like, because the nominees are all really nice and the films are all brilliant, and thank God. But it's thank God they cut out the
Stop.
Yeah, I did. I stopped.
Well, so here, along the lines of where I think you're going, though, directing is a fairly solitary job, I think, in the sense at least you're not around a lot of other directors. You're the commander of your own ship. So you guys being here tonight and having heard and listened to the kind of track record of each other's work, which I'm sure you've seen anyway, I wondered, is there a question that you guys might have for each other just about what you do? Is there something you're curious about the way the other works?
I believe you did invent the bubble gum and put them into cards. I think you might be older than you've led us to believe.
You know, he got all the best questions. You asked him about all his other films and his playwriting, everything, and I got the bubblegum and the tequila.
Well, here's your chance, though. I guess, like, you know, is there something? What do you, when you meet other filmmakers, what are you most curious about how they approach something that you do?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to see that they're alive. You know, it's a very, you know, I remember when I started at the American Film Institute, after making my first short film, like what you're talking about, trying to put, you know, everything you possibly can into it, I wanted to go back to every director I'd ever met and like wax their car. You know, I felt like I hadn't helped them enough, you know, because I don't think that anyone that hasn't done this job understands this job. You know, so my hat's off to anyone who's done it. And I'm so thrilled to meet other filmmakers. I'm so thrilled to meet Martin, you know.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, an interesting thing is, I want to talk about because you guys are also obviously usually the writer. I think almost exclusively the writers of the films that you've made. Is that something that you would ever consider? Would you ever consider making a film that someone else wrote, or is that so integral to the process for you that you would?
It has been for me up until this point, but I'm kind of running out of scripts, so. Have you got anything laying about?
Yeah, we'll talk after.
And Todd, I guess this is an original script, Tar. Your two prior features were adaptations. Do you prefer? What are the pros and cons of those, of adapting versus originating material?
That's a good question. I like that question.
Thank you.
This is going to be a good answer.
In all seriousness, you know, yes, the other two films were adaptations, and I worked alongside other writers, and it was much less lonely. I guess the main difference is that, you know, I've had the privilege of working with the people that originated these characters that we're adapting and their worlds that they built. And I've learned a lot. You know, I've learned a lot from working with Jonathan Franz, and I've learned a lot from working with Joan Didion, and I've learned a lot from working with Tom Perrotta and Jess Walter and others. And going back to your question about what kind of question would you ask another director when you meet them, you know, writers, unless they work in writer's room, are a fairly solitary, misanthropic bunch, you know. We're not really happy people, you know. And so it's so nice to find another, you know, misery loves company, you know. So, but I guess, you know, in this case, you know, I've been sort of openly envious of my fiction friends, and I'd always ask them, what's it like, you know, to sit down and just be able to do what Martin does, and they said, it's fucking great, you know, and they're right. Yeah. So yeah, it's better.
That being said, Martin, would you, all of your feature films have been original? Do you ever read a book or something and say, I wish I could make this into a film? Would you ever consider adapting?
I haven't up until this point, because I always felt like it was more interesting to keep coming up with new things, and up until this point, it's worked out that way. I think I'm going to stick to that.
Yeah.
But I have seen a few things later that you kind of wonder if it's worth going down that route. But right now, I'm still sort of determined to keep cracking on. Yeah.
You mentioned Pinter as being a giant influence, you know, in your sort of semi-allergy to theater. And I reckon that you've studied the films that he wrote as well, right?
Yeah.
I imagine you're a big fan of the
Very, very much. And you kind of almost wonder what would a film that he directed be like too. He had such an imprint, obviously, on all of the movies he made, and obviously all of the plays, that you kind of wonder if that would have freed him up even more, if he'd have loved it or not. We'll never know.
Just coming back to, commonalities and differences. Obviously, we mentioned a lot of the theater work of Martin and Todd. Does theater appeal to you in any significant way, doing playwriting?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd love to be able to have the time to go back into the theater. Theater is really an actor's medium and a playwright's medium, but it takes time. And as Martin was pointing out, not being able to get high earners necessarily to want to go on stage and take that time out, you have to be able to organize yourself and your life in a way to be able to do theater, because nobody gets rich doing theater. It's very hard. That you have to invest a certain amount of yourself and your fortune to be able to actually to do theater and do it properly.
Yeah.
Did you act on stage much?
Yeah, I started on stage.
So, again, we mentioned writing and directing, both pretty solitary endeavors a lot of the time in certain respects. That being said, is there anyone before your work goes out, whether it's a script or a completed film, or before it goes out to the world, whose opinion about it do you value the most? Is there anyone in your life who gets to weigh in before the executives or whoever else?
I wouldn't say weigh in, but I've always made my films for one person, and she's very tough.
Martin?
Yeah, lately I've been giving it to showing my scripts to my girlfriend. Before that, I was...
May I share who this person? No, okay. All right.
They can Google it.
Very talented person as well.
But she's quite good,
Yes,
and she's quite tough.
Yes.
She's really...
Yes. Very talented.
She's too tough, actually. But before that, but at the same time, I don't know if you have the... I think you have to... Just so you don't get the executive kind of stuff, I think you have to have a strong sense of its pluses and its minuses. And I don't know if you feel that way before you give it to her. Does she sway you if it's a negative?
Well, I mean, we work differently because she actually is a writer as well. So she wrote my last film at the American Film Institute, and she's very, very keen eye. It's always kind of weighing the checks and balances of giving her something. In actual fact, I've always given her the script when I finished, and she's always had something to say. And that's always been very difficult, but always better after we get past the sort of problem. My problem, not hers, But on this one, we made this decision that we weren't going to do anything, and she didn't see the film. This is the first time ever until I showed it to her when it was finished in London, about 2 weeks before Venice. So that was a really frightening situation. It worked out, but there was no guarantee,
Wow. So you didn't want to show it to her any earlier in the process?
No, I think she didn't want to go through that with me. I asked her, we talked about certain, vague things, and she was extremely helpful, as she always is, but she just patently refused to read it, so.
Okay, so we mentioned that you both went through the award season process for the first time in the first decade of the 21st century. We're now, in both of your cases, more or less approximately 20 years later, a little bit more, a little bit less. What are the most marked ways in which this whole time of year has changed between then and now? Todd?
If I remember this correctly, this is 22 years ago since I had my first film out. God, I'm so old. But back then, we didn't have smartphones and we didn't have the internet other than, maybe AOL and email, when AOL was a thing. And there was no podcasts. And as a society, our attention was a little calmer. And so when you went out with a film, you might go to one foreign festival. I think I went to Deauville, I went to Montreal, I went to Toronto. In Toronto, you would sit down with press and you would do your video press, and that was it. And after that, maybe you would talk to a reporter at Premiere Magazine when there was still a print magazine, and maybe David Anson at Newsweek, and maybe Entertainment Weekly, and that was it, And so the amount of time that you spent in the so-called fourth quarter specialty, world of film, other than if you were fortunate enough to show up and have your film and others recognized in some manner, was very, very brief. And I think that's how it was 22 years ago, and that's certainly how it was back in 2006 and 2007. This year is something else,
Yeah, it's great. Like in Bruges, I don't think I did a single interview or anything. That could have been because the production company was trying to promote milk instead of us, but I'm not better. But this is, but I think there was a good bit more for Three Billboards, because that was only like 4 or 5 years ago, and you kind of saw a little bit into the machine that it's become. And I think I was still sort of slightly on the outs with it, but this is something else. It's crazy, but it's a proper machine on it. It's like a different business almost, like they intersect, but it's strange. I don't know if it's because all the friends are nominated too, but I kind of find it fun. I like Googling it and checking the odds and
Right.
making some side bets.
Right.
Which I'm not sure if is illegal for the Academy. Do you know, Todd? Anyway, I won some money back on the Free Billboards days by betting against myself. So if you want to make some money this year, do the same.
Along those, follow-up to that question, what is the one question about your film this season, that you wish you never have to answer again?
So you wrote this film with Cate Blanchett in mind?
Okay, Martin?
I hate getting that question too, about, why did Cate Blanchett not want to do your Irish film? She can do everything.
Yeah, right. What is the 2022 movie not represented on this stage that you would most recommend to our attendees tonight?
I loved Women Talking. I think that's like I saw it in Toronto, the world premiere, and I think Sarah Polley's amazing. I think that's just a stunning piece of work.
Todd?
I agree with you. I would say Women Talking. I would say Charlotte Wells' Aftersun. I would say Alejandro's Bardo. Especially now, I appreciate that film more than ever. There's so many. I would say Noah's film. I think Noah's film is wildly ambitious and really, really worth watching. Again, and I've seen it a couple of times. I haven't seen all the films. Alice Diop's film. Have you seen Alice's film? That's an
Saint Omer. Yeah,
incredible piece of work.
Yeah.
But there's so many films. I think that one of the things that this period of time has sort of proven is that so many people came out of the pandemic really ready to explode. It was like, okay, if we're going to say something, let's say it, because we may not be able to do it again. And I think it's very, very strong work out there, whoever has been recognized or not. There's great, great films.
Yeah.
Final question is one, This may be the question that you, not specific to 2022, that you least want to deal with, but just out of curiosity, for all the people who have loved your 2022 films, do you know yet, and can you share what's next? I don't know what she said, but
Me neither. No, I can't either. I've got something set on a different island.
all right. A vacation?
I want to see. I like beaches.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I want to do next. It might not be a film. It might just be, yeah.
Right. Todd, any hints?
I'm just going to go home.
Well, given how busy things have been lately, and for a few more weeks, thank you guys very much for making the time to come to Santa Barbara. And
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Really
Thanks,
appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Scott.
And to close this out, the executive director of the film festival, Roger Durling.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! First of all, let's give a warm round of applause for Scott Feinberg for what a wonderful conversation moderated by him. It is undeniable that these two artists, Todd and Martin, have a singular vision. They both have signature styles that are instantly recognizable. Martin McDonagh was someone I've greatly admired since 1986 when I got to see two of his plays, Beauty Queen of Lebanon and The Cripple of Inishmaan. And I obsessively look forward to his subsequent theatrical work, The Lonesome West, The Lieutenant of Inishmore, A Beheading of Spokane, and Hangman, which was, by the way, Hangman, which was auspiciously the last work I would see before COVID paralyzed our lives for 2 years. It was such a memorable work, Hangman. Then, in its memory, I was able to find solace during a period in which live theater was impossible. The New York Times has called Martin the theater's reigning master of gory Irish Gothic. And then to the joy of us, I missed that. And then to the joy of us who love movies as much as theater, Mr. McDonagh became a filmmaker, bringing with him dark imagination and his arsenal of absurd violence, nasty laughs, loads of great talk, and people behaving badly, and such rich characters that allows his performers to bring out their best. Martin juxtaposes comedy against violence and churns out laughter at the most unexpected moments, catching you unguarded and wondering, why are you chuckling at this particular situation? His work has a sentimental cordiality, and all of a sudden it can turn savage. And as he shows in Banshees, he can blend Irish folksiness with absurdity. But to me, the most shocking aspect is the big heart that palpitates in all of his work. There's whimsy, eccentricities, and of course, Gaelic charm. I can honestly say, Martin, that I look forward to what you do next, both in theater as well in the movies. It's rare to find someone who is a master at both like you are. May you continue to regale us with your gifts. Late last year, Todd Field came to Santa Barbara to do a Q&A for TAR. First time I met him, and leading up to it, I was filled with so much fear because it is rare that you meet a person of such protean talent and intellect. Are you? Oh, okay, you're not rolling your eyes. Okay, good. I've taught his... I've taught Todd Field's films, and the thought of speaking with him that first time at the Riviera Theater, late December, felt so intimidating. Soon I found out, as you guys did, that he's someone, yes, with immeasurable skill and precision in his filmmaking, but also with a wry sense of humor and boundless curiosity. He was here for the writers' panel and the producers' panel last weekend, and I can honestly say that getting to know you, Todd, has been so rewarding. It's rare to get to know your idols, and I got the opportunity this past year. A lot of American movies are committed to big spectacle and pushing your emotions. It's rare to find a filmmaker like Todd Field, who is an auteur, who can be so profound as well as entertaining. Your films, Todd, made me feel like nothing short of a miracle. I love the way you show us in your film characters with tragic flaws without passing judgment. You create an ominous sense of the inescapable in them, like great tragedies do. And after repeated viewings like I've done, I'm in awe of the command of your visual storytelling. Rich, detailed, multi-layered. Never talking down to your audience, inviting us to rise to the complexities of your artistry, which is both compassionate and severe. Not surprisingly, you work with Kubrick, and dare I put you in the same category? Well, I just did. I've seen Tar multiple times now, and the visual language you created to let us navigate the inner world of Lydia is just astonishing. You make movies that are challenging, yet accessible and impossible to stop thinking about after we see them. My only wish is you don't make us wait for a long time for your next movie. As you've had in the past, I'm waiting for your next move, Mr. Field, and the world is waiting as well. Thank you both for being here tonight. Thank you both for enriching our lives the way you've done. And here's the Outstanding Directors of the Year award.